Thanks, Dan. It's great to be back here in Pittsburgh giving this talk, Creative Petroleum Exploration. I was here a few years ago at the AAPG National Convention, and I see a lot of my friends in the audience. And thanks, Mike Kanich and Dan, for inviting me to speak today. And today I'm talking about creative petroleum exploration. My given name is Edward, but I go by Ted. I'm a geologist from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I work for Cimarex Energy, and I put prospects together like you guys do. And you might wonder why I ever put together a talk like this. I wonder sometimes myself, but the reason I did it was because I wanted to learn about creativity, because I heard a speaker like me give a talk about the importance of creativity in petroleum exploration. That was Ted Baer about 30 years ago, and it had a big impact on my career. So I want to learn more about it, and today I hope I can intrigue you enough to give you the impetus to go ahead and learn about creativity, because creativity is an individualistic thing, and each of us has our own way to get there. So you have to find your own path. And I hope that today that I get you at least interested enough to learn more about it. And one way is to learn about all those things Charles has on the DPA website. So you might ask a few questions about when you saw the title of this talk, you might have wondered a few things, and I just thought of some questions I've heard people ask over the years. Are oil finders creative? And I would say that there are people that stumble into oil and gas, but there are people that tend to find it over and over again, and I believe that they are creative. How is creativity related to petroleum exploration? If you think about what we do for our living, is we're trying to find oil and gas in places that other people don't think it exists. So we have to be creative, and we have to convince people that we're right, or that we could be right, so they'll test the ideas. And what are other qualities do effective explorers possess besides being creative? There are other qualities like being persistent and believing in yourselves. Can anyone become more creative? And I would say that they can, that we're born creative, but somehow that's trained out of us, that creativity is a skill. And then after the unconventional revolution, is creativity still important? There are some, I actually had a friend of mine, a geologist in Denver, say he wondered about how important creativity was now because of the unconventional revolution, that we're just drilling on sort of a statistical, pattern. And I think that, Bill Zagorski put the Marcellus play together. That took creativity. We still need creativity because, believe it or not, we're going to drill those plays up eventually. This is a picture of Thomas Edison, who's famous for having said that creativity is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, and I think that's absolutely true. You've got to be motivated to be creative. You have to like what you do for a living, or you won't be motivated enough to put in the sweat. So today I'd like to talk about these things. One is the misperceptions that people have within our own industry about how oil and gas is found, how ideas find oil and gas, what the creative process is and how it's applied to petroleum exploration, the characteristics of people who find oil and gas over and over again, and how you can become more creative. And first, I'd like to acknowledge these four people. On the far left-hand side is Ted Baer, and Ted Baer is the guy that I heard give a talk that got me interested in putting this talk together. I didn't really put this talk together on purpose. I just ran into Norm Foster, who's next to him on the right, and he was studying creativity because he heard the same talk that Ted Baer gave. What Ted Baer said was that he had been taking courses at UCLA just for fun on creativity, and that they were saying that only 2 or 3% of the population actually uses creativity in their work, and that what Ted thought about was that he thought only 2 or 3% of geologists could actually be shown to have found oil and gas. And if we could just increase that, double that, it would have a huge impact on our industry, and as big of an impact as any new technology. So I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, geez, I probably ought to learn more about creativity. And I hope that you guys get interested in it too. And so Norm Foster and I ran into each other, and we put a talk together for the RMAG because he had done a talk at one of his study groups in Denver, and they liked it so much, he asked me if I'd do a talk with him, and I did. And then Dick Vincelette, who's next to him on the right, and Norm and I did a short course for AAPG, which I haven't done for a while, but it was a 3-day short course eventually. It grew and grew. And then Norm passed away, Dick retired, and I started doing this course with one of my old classmates, Doug Strickland, who Charles mentioned earlier, found the oil and gas big, huge fields in the thrust belt in Utah. So what are the misperceptions? We've all seen these slides. This is what people think about our industry. You've all seen variations of this, what my parents think I do on the upper left-hand side, what my friends think I do, what society thinks I do, what my boss thinks I do, what I think I do, and what I really do. And, you know, unfortunately, that last one, I think, is the reality. But here are the misperceptions that people have about our industry that work within the industry. And that is, first, that technology finds oil and gas. And they think that if you get the latest seismic technology, or there's some new attribute that you get, you're going to find lots of oil and gas. And all you have to do is find some technicians to get that data and work on it. Finding oil and gas is just a matter of luck. If you drill enough wells in the same place, you're going to find oil and gas eventually. And they think that if you drill on a pattern, and there really are people that believe this, if you drill on a pattern, you would be more successful than the way we've approached it historically. And that skill plays a minor role, that really you just need people that have a degree, a technologist, and they put this stuff together and they find oil and gas. They don't really understand that finding oil and gas, it takes imagination and creativity, and the ideas are what are important. And this guy, who is from Pittsburgh, around here somewhere, he's famous for this one quote, which I want to read again, but this is Park Dickey. He worked here in Pittsburgh for a long time, and he spent a lot of time in South America, and especially in the Lake Maracaibo area, and he was honored by the Bolivarian Symposium in South America, which this is a cover from their magazine, for the work he did down there. But he's famous for this one quote, which bears repeating. We usually find oil in new places with old ideas. Sometimes also we find oil in an old place with a new idea, but we seldom find much oil in an old place with an old idea. Several times in the past we thought we were running out of oil, whereas actually we were only running out of ideas. And that was definitely true until recently, right? And then everything changed. This is John Masters. He started a company in Canada called Canadian Hunter and found the Elmworth oil and gas field. But he was very good at articulating how oil and gas is found. And he said part of the definition, and he talked about new ideas, part of the definition of a new idea is that it will be rejected at first. Evolution teaches us that most new ideas don't work, so we learn to be against them. Big ideas do not come from groups or committees. Throughout history, they have come from individuals, and normal people almost never recognize the importance of the idea until much later on. To achieve outstanding results, new exploration concepts must be applied, and few investors are willing to accept that degree of risk. And that's really important, because if you are like me and you sold oil and gas prospects, you know how hard it is when you've got a really good new idea to convince somebody to drill your prospect. It takes a lot of work. And this is Wallace Pratt, who's very famous for this one quote, "Oil is first found in the mind." That was published in a paper in 1952 in the AAPG Bulletin called Toward a Philosophy of Oil Finding. And if you haven't read this paper, I encourage you to read it. If you've read it, go back and read it again. But he talks about two things that block our ability to find oil and gas. One of them is the natural conservatism of the trained scientific mind. It gets trained out of us somehow. We become more and more conservative as we get older. And what he says is we tend to ignore the significance of what we don't know. we tend to overvalue what we know and undervalue what we don't know. And this is his quote: "However small our knowledge may be, it tends often not only to color but actually to obscure what remains unknown to us." And if you read the book The Black Swan by Aqib Taleb, he says in there almost exactly the same thing is true in all these other industries, that people tend to overvalue what they know and discount too much what they don't understand. So that's really an important thing to understand about yourselves, and I'm guilty of it. I thought that shale plays, were never going to work. And, I had a chance to get in the Barnett shale play early, and I was too smart. I didn't do it. I wish I had, because I could have gotten it really early. So there are different definitions of creativity, and here are a couple. I like these simple ones, like having original ideas that have value. And this one I really liked was from Webster's, and it is the ability to bring something new into existence through imaginative skill. And I like those two words, imaginative skill. So creativity is a skill that you can develop. And there's this right brain, left brain model that all of us are familiar with that was, popular a few years ago. But it's a good model, and it's based on the fact that the brain is divided into two hemispheres, and each of those hemispheres is responsible for different kinds of thinking. So, in this model, which is simplified, I admit, but it's useful to understand that this table kind of contrasts the two thinking modes. The left brain is logical, whereas the right brain is intuitive. The left brain is rational, whereas the right brain is holistic. The left brain is analytical, whereas the right brain is synthesizing. The left brain is objective, whereas the right brain is subjective. The left brain looks at parts, whereas the right brain looks at wholes. And something happens to us. I think our educational system is great. It teaches us how to use our right brain, but most of us don't ever learn how to use to use our left brain, but don't teach us how to use our right brains. That artistic side of us. Somehow we lose that. It's the subconscious part of your brain that actually operates below your level of consciousness. You look for patterns, you recognize faces because your right brain is doing that. It sees things and it can process visual data very quickly. So there's a process of creativity that was outlined by a woman named Betty Edwards, and this is what she said is you got to learn to use both sides of your brain. And the first thing you do when you're creative is you get an insight. You notice something and it bothers you, and you start to get intrigued by it. And that's your right brain working. You switch over to your left brain. You saturate yourself with information. And eventually you kind of feel oversaturated, like you don't have the answer. Your boss is asking all the time, what's going on? And you have to let the idea incubate. That's where you turn it back over to your right brain. And then you have an illumination. That's when your right brain makes your left brain aware of a solution. You wake up and you have to verify the idea. So it's not just using your right brain, it's using your left and right brain. So how does it work in petroleum exploration? We get an insight. That's a right brain function. It's an intuitive leap. It's something is missing or it doesn't fit. You hear a talk, you look. The way I do it is I'm looking on it, like working on a plate, and I'll start noticing other things that I'm not really looking for, and I'll start thinking, that's really interesting. It's maybe something way up the hole. I'll see some porosity in a show or something, and I'd start, just going off on a tangent kind of. But there's ways that you do that. So you get an insight. And it's important to be curious, to ask questions. The question can be the key, and have a rich knowledge network. So the more experience you have, or the more you've watched these videos that Charles talked about, the better you are at this first insight step. Then you begin saturating yourself with information. It's a left brain function. It's gathering, sorting, and categorizing information. It's arduous. That's the perspiration part of what Edison talked about. And it can take hours or it can take years. It doesn't happen necessarily just overnight. It can take a while. And this is the hard part about this is, well, and I put this last one in of my friend Don Burdick, just to show the more modern slide than the one I have there. We still do that, and that's reality. We sit in front of computer screens. But first insight, it provides the guiding light for this step. Like you kind of know what you're looking for because there's so much information out of there, you got to focus a little bit. Then you turn the problem over to your right brain, and you can do it subconsciously. You don't even know you've done it, but you're anxious, and somebody comes in your office all the time saying, hey, your boss is going, we're paying you a lot of money, where's your idea? We got to do something. We got a rig waiting for you to tell us where to go, where are we going to go next? So you feel frustrated, and it's a left brain faltering, and it turns it over to the right brain. And you feel stuck, and you feel this sense of anxiety because you've worked so hard on this thing, and you don't have the answer, and everybody's wanting some answer. So you put it away, and the right brain works on it subconsciously. You don't even know you're working on the problem. It's a weird thing to think about, but I know I do that. And then you wake up sometime. You can be sleeping, taking a walk, a shower. You're usually relaxing, doing something that has nothing to do with the problem. The pieces fall together, and you have that aha moment. And the right brain, when that happens, the right brain makes the left brain aware of the solution because your left brain is your conscious side. And the solution always seems obvious because you're looking back at how you got there. When you're looking ahead, you can't see where to go because there's all these possibilities. And I got on the internet, and they're just, what's funny is the guy that drew this slide for me, an artist, he drew it the same way. Everybody kind of does that, Thought it was sort of funny. And then finally you have to verify, and it's a left brain process. You wonder where the solution came from, but you've got to test the solution, and really this is important. Sometimes you can have the wrong information, or your imagination, believe it or not, can get carried away. And you got to test your ideas. They really don't mean anything if you don't verify them and then get them tested. So you might say, geez, I'm so left brain, I need, I don't know if I'm ever going to become more right brain, or I can do this, balancing act. And here are two geologists, Ben Peach and John Horn. They're Scottish geologists, and they unraveled the complex geology of the Scottish Highlands. But Peach was more the right brain guy. He's the guy on the right-hand side of the slide. And John Horn was more left brain, and they complemented each other because Peach could visualize what was going on, but he couldn't explain it. And John Horn had the patience to listen to him and then articulate what he knew that Peach was trying to say. So sometimes you have to find partners and find people that complement you, and be aware of who you are and how somebody might complement what you do. And this is a picture of the first geological department in the world. And they're sitting there with their plane tables and alidades, the technology of that time. This is in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. They work for a company called Indian Territory Illuminating Oil Company, and they worked in south central Kansas, where people said there weren't any big structures, no one was going to find any big oil and gas fields. They found this huge field called El Dorado Field, which was like a 120 million barrel field, something like that. And the ironic part of this is what we're going through right now. Everybody knows that here. My company is having voluntary layoffs right now, so we just are too good at what we do. These guys got laid off because the company said that but they would never need that much oil and gas. The world would never need 120 million barrels of oil. So it happens over and over again. It started at the beginning. Well, Norm Foster and I put together this book called Exploring for Oil and Gas Traps. We wrote to different oil finders from around the world, about 75 different people. We asked them questions, and one of them was, what characterizes oil finders? And this is one answer that I like from David Pally, a Canadian. He said, persistence is number one, 2, enthusiasm for oil exploration, 3, self-confidence, 4, risk takers, 5, intuitive sense of where exploration opportunities exist, 6, ability to diagnose the critical elements of a play. And you know, the interesting thing about this list is that one, persistence is number one. That was the one most people pointed out as the number one characteristic. You've got to be persistent. You have to believe in your ideas. You can't be discouraged. Here's another one that I liked. Same question. The scientific oil finder's characteristics, I believe, are as follows: observant, curious, logical, intelligent, creative, dedicated, outdoorsy, risk-oriented, independent, derives pleasure from making order out of chaos. I believe the above does not sound, I hope that the above does not sound too much like a horoscope reading, but all or parts of each are needed, and I think he's right. So how can you become a more effective explorer? This is Max Steinecke, the guy who created the Gowar prospect that led to the discovery of the largest oil field in the world. And you know, when he arrived in Saudi Arabia, someone asked him what he thought about what he saw, and he said, because they were saying it like, isn't this a terrible place to be? Wouldn't you rather be somewhere else? And he said, I can't wait to start drilling. I've seen like 5 or 6 structures I want to drill. I mean, this guy was a very positive thinker. So first, remember what the creative process is. Respect your insights, and you need to record them. You need to write them down and then follow up on them, because your ideas are fragile. You know, if someone walks in your office after you've had one of these insights and starts talking to you, you may forget the insight completely. So you need to write them down and then follow up on them. Expect to be anxious. It's just part of the process. That's why I think Van Gogh chopped one of his ears off, because he was so anxious about a painting he was making of someone. Learn to put the problem away for a while. Try to, learn that it's just part of it. Let it incubate. Stay focused, but you'll get to the answer eventually. Check your ideas and then sell your ideas. And if you're not good at all these things, maybe you need to find people that are better at selling things than you are. I mean, find a team. Develop your visual skills, and this is really important. Our science is a visual science, and the better we are at expressing our ideas for ourselves visually, the way we can see them with graphs, like Pickett plots, Buckles plots, 3D structural models, anything we can come up with that helps us visualize things makes us better. And then emulate oil finders, and especially for the younger people who are in the audience. Make sure that you find somebody who's good at finding oil and gas, and then learn from them. And I was lucky; I got to learn from a few people. One of them was Norm Foster. And then build that team and complement your skills and their skills with one another. So find your own pathway. Everybody has a different way to get there. Mine and yours aren't the same necessarily. You just have to learn what helps you and then follow that way. And learn more about it. Do what Charles said, get online and look. Be prepared to be wrong. Exploring is learning, and you can be wrong about your ideas, and that's okay. That's just part of it. Defocus your mind, brainstorm. Learn to relax and concentrate, and there's a new term we use now called mindfulness. Learn to do that. Learn to live in the moment, and then overcome blocks to your creativity. And I'll just say, I think the number one block to creativity is being afraid. Being afraid of either losing your job, which that's a big fear, I understand, losing your everything, or making a fool out of yourself. So you just have to learn to overcome different kinds of blocks, conceptual and emotional. And just in conclusion, new ideas expect the chance of success. We don't always find what we expect to find. Be ready to see things, look to see new things that you didn't expect. And persistence pays, and technology helps. So we want the latest technology. And the harder you work, the luckier you get. So you create your own luck. And this is Dan Stewart, who's famous for finding the Barnett Shale play, and they say it's a play that took 30 years developed overnight with 30 years of work, and he was the guy that did it. And finally, I'd just like to dedicate my talk to Norm Foster, who he had oil on his mind, and I was lucky to work with him. And thank you very much. If you have any questions, and I hope that I got you interested enough to learn more about creativity. Thanks.